Hey guys, so in today's lesson, we're finally going to start talking about the nervous system as a whole. So let's get into it. So in this lesson on the nervous system, we're going to be going over the different structures and functions of the central nervous system, as well as the peripheral nervous system. So those are the two main kind of subcategories of the nervous system. The central nervous system is just the brain and the spine, and then the peripheral nervous system is everything else. So your sensory receptors, your peripheral nerves, your motor nerves, your effectors, all of that kind of stuff. So the central nervous system is the part that regulates the nervous system. It is, again, the brain and spinal cord. The brain controls both some of your voluntary and involuntary responses. So voluntary, like deciding to move, involuntary, like your breathing when you're sleeping and you're just not thinking about it. The spinal cord is the communication link between the brain and the peripheral nervous system, which again is just the nerves in the rest of your body. And it does also control your reflex arcs, so your reflexive actions. Both the brain and spinal cord are protected by bone. You have the skull protecting the brain and your vertebrae, which protect your spinal cord. You also have meninges and cerebrospinal fluid, which add protection as well. The meninges protect the central spinal cord. They are three layers of really tough elastic tissue. You have the dura mater, the arachnoid mater, and then the pia mater, side to inside. And then the cerebrospinal fluid flows between the innermost and the middle layer of the meninges, surrounding the brain, and then through the central canal of the spinal cord. And the reason that that fluid is there is, one, to act as like a shock absorber. So if your like head gets hit, your brain is like gonna hit some like liquid before it hits your skull, for instance. It also carries nutrients to the brain and waste away to the blood. You've probably heard the term white and gray matter before. Both the brain and spinal cord have white matter and gray matter. And all that that means is if it's white matter, it is myelinated, so it has that myelin sheath around it. The signal is going to transmit more quickly. Gray matter is just unmyelinated, so the signals transmit a bit more slowly, allowing them to disperse to more areas of the body. The spinal cord is just a column of nerve tissue that extends from the brain down through your spinal cord. Through your spine, I should say, the bones of your spine. And then that is going to connect to the peripheral nervous system. The gray matter is made of unmyelinated interneurons. The white matter is myelinated. That is going to link up to your sensory and your motor neurons. The dorsal root, which is at the base of the spine, brings sensory information into the spinal cord, and then the ventral root carries motor information out of the spinal cord to the effectors. The brain is in control of most of the nervous system, pretty much everything other than your reflex arcs. It's made up of a whole bunch of different structures and lobes that we're going to go into in the next lesson. The peripheral nervous system is made up of both motor and sensory neurons. So those are kind of the two different pathways. The sensory pathway is going to gather information from the sensory receptors and send it to the central nervous system. And then the motor pathway relays the information from the central nervous system to the effectors, so different muscles and glands of the body. Cranial nerves take impulses to and from the brain, and then spinal nerves take impulses to and from the spinal cord. You can also break down the peripheral nervous system into the voluntary and involuntary sections. The voluntary actions are controlled by the somatic nervous system. Involuntary actions are controlled by the autonomic nervous system, but both of them are part of the peripheral nervous system. The somatic nervous system is also sometimes called the sensory somatic nervous system because it senses and responds to external stimulus. the nerves take messages from your external sensory receptors, like your skin, like thermoreceptors in your skin and stuff like that, to the central nervous system, and then takes motor commands from the central nervous system to your skeletal muscles. This is made up of a whole bunch of different cranial nerves, which control things like vision, hearing, balance, taste, smell, movement. Also myelinated spinal nerves, which control all of your muscles and stuff like that. The somatic nervous system is mostly controlling only voluntary actions like movement and stuff like that, though also your reflex arcs. And then the autonomic nervous system senses and responds to internal stimuli. It brings information about your internal environment, like your blood pH and your oxygen levels and stuff like that. Brings all of that information from the sensory receptors inside your body to the central nervous system, and then from the central nervous system back to the effectors. In that case, usually glands and stuff like that that can release hormones or other chemicals to regulate that internal environment. It controls like smooth muscle, like what you would find in your digestive system, cardiac muscle, like in your heart, and then other internal organs and glands, like everything from like your pancreas to like your thyroid gland, all that kind of stuff, adrenal gland. This control is involuntary, so it's nothing that you can actually like think about and do. The autonomic nervous system is then further divided into two different subsystems, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous systems. The sympathetic nervous system is essentially your fight or flight responses. This is how you respond when you sense danger or you're in a stressful situation. So it's going to increase your heart rate and your breathing rate to get more oxygen into your body and then around to all of your cells. It's going to decrease digestion, so you're not wasting energy digesting things when you might have to like fight or run away. It's going to release glucose from your liver, so you have more blood sugar, so more energy available to your cells to work with. It's going to dilate your pupils to try and take in more sensory information. It's going to cause blood to flow to your skin and cause you to sweat. It's going to trigger your adrenal gland, which is one of the effectors in this case, to release epinephrine, which is adrenaline. And it may cause your bladder sphincter to relax, which would cause you to pee yourself if you're very scared. And then the parasympathetic nervous system is the part of the autonomic nervous system that controls your like rest and recovery function. So it's bringing your body back to normal after a stressful situation. So it's going to decrease your heart rate, decrease your breathing rate, get your digestive system up and running again. It's going to start storing any leftover sugar from your blood back in your liver. Your pupils will contract back to normal. Your blood flow to your skin will decrease back to normal levels. Lie detectors essentially measure the sympathetic nervous system responses to try and tell if someone is lying or not. Since lying is considered a stressful event for most people. So they can measure things like perspiration, breathing rate, and heart rate, but they're not 100% accurate because they can't differentiate between the stress of lying and other stresses that may be present. So this is kind of a summary of the nervous system. We have the central nervous system, which is just the brain and spinal cord. Then we have the peripheral nervous system, which is both sensory and motor. Then you also have like the somatic and autonomic nervous system responses. You will sometimes see somatic also connected to the sensory pathway, since it is a sensory somatic. And then the autonomic is the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. Okay, that is it for today's lesson. Next up, the brain.